Okay, we're just going to have a panel discussion. We've got some questions that worked out with my esteemed panelists here. And so I thought maybe it'd be good to do an introduction, and then we'll get to it. So my name is Danny Petkovich. I'm with Qualcomm, and I'm a director of camera product marketing. And I thought also it'd probably be good to give you a little background on my imaging. So I love to do photography, and particularly flowers and geometric shapes and things like that. So I thought it'd also be good if you guys, if you're into photography, maybe some of the things that you turned your crank, as it were. Okay, Karthik?
So I think, I'm founder and CTO of Pelican Imaging. We actually,
Yeah, that's,
microphone.
there you go.
Yeah. So we do computational array cameras. We have been a startup. We have been a startup since 2009 when we got funded. We have come out with reference designs, and we certainly see a lot of applications in mobile space. And there's a booth upstairs. For those of you who haven't seen it, feel free to go by and take a look. I think there is considerable excitement about imaging in general, about what is to come, because as much as we have made a lot of progress over the years in mobile, there's still a lot to be done. And as the convergence of manufacturing technology, scalability, and computational efficiencies, both in power and compute, converge, you will begin to see more and more exciting applications in imaging space. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anant, and I lead up the computer vision project in Qualcomm, specifically in our chipset division. And I think over the last few years, we've been focused more on computer vision in general, but I think imaging is one of the, the only real use case in the next couple of years to enhance, recording of memories that we all know very well. And so we think that cameras are going to get smarter. Phones have gotten smarter, but the cameras in them, I think, still have some ways to go before they can get smarter, and we are excited to be enabling that. Yeah.
My name is Farshid Sabat. I'm responsible for business at Movidius, which develops the vision processor hardware. I was previously at Aptino, responsible for mobile and PC and gaming business. So here at Movidius, we developed a product that is enabling a lot of the exciting applications that you're developing in the area of computational photography, vision sensing, computer vision that Anand talked about, and so forth.
I'm Paul Gallagher, responsible for business at Omnivision. I'm sure, hopefully, all of you know about Omnivision. We're in most cameras around the world in terms of platforms, mobile, tablet, PC, security, automotive, medical, toys, gaming, and we see we're constantly driving to how do we answer the question of this session? What is the future of imaging? Where do we need to be? So look forward to this.
So I thought I'd start off with just a little object lesson. So who's got a camera with them right now? Okay. Can you guys all take your cameras out? We're going to do an experiment. Okay? Can you take them out? You got a smartphone? Let's take it out. I'm going to do something very simple. I'm just going to throw the orange in the air, and let's see who can capture it, and then look at your picture, because this will tell you what the current state of the art of imaging is. You guys ready? Okay? Oh. Okay, my point exactly. You guys ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, everybody look at your pictures. Okay, wait. Somebody just said, I didn't get one. So other people's responses. Which one? Okay, so we got a burst shot. That was cool. Other responses. Did you just get a blur? Some people got nothing. Nothing, right? A blur, right? It's amazing. That is the state of the art. And guys, you're the upper demographic. You have flagship phones. Okay? This is the best of the best. So the rest of the world has mid and low tier phones. Imagine what they're getting. And also, just as a point, you know, a lot of people can't even afford DSCs, right? So their smartphone really is their first camera. And as I forgot, somebody here said, these are our memories. These are our, you know, part of who we are. Imaging is extremely personal, right? So this session, I think, is really interesting because if we can solve this problem, right, just taking a good picture, we will help everybody in the world have amazing memories and capture it. I mean, I look back at mine, I have no pictures of when I was a kid. I don't know if that's because of my family situation or what, but I take 1 million pictures of my children today, right? And it's fully photographed, right? And you can see when I had the 2 megapixel to the 8 megapixel, I mean, you could see the extent. You know, the future is really going to be in our mobile cameras. So that's really what this session is about, and those are the type of questions I'll try to ask from, you know, what we see in the field today, and hopefully our panelists will give us some insight. And if we have time at the end, I'd love to get your perspective too, okay? So let's start. The Oscars, right? The selfie heard around the world. And I love this quote from Ellen. She goes, "If only Bradley Cooper's arm was longer, best photo ever," right? That's what she tweeted. So my first question to our esteemed panel is, what do you think the response to the selfie or the Ussies will be? What is the next thing that's going to happen? Because I know in China it's crazy right now what's happening on the front side of the camera. But I'll just throw it out to the panel. I don't know if you just want to go down or whatnot. Selfies. How do we solve this problem of Bradley Cooper's arm not being long enough?
So I think, so actually one way to solve it is if you've gone to Asia, you'll see that people actually have poles that they take out and put the phone on. So that's one way to do it.
Who's got a pole with them? All right, nobody. That's probably not as practical.
But if you don't have that, then I think you have to look at the whole experience. So if you look at why people take selfies, I mean, there are 2 or 3 reasons. One is they just want to take a picture of themselves with maybe some of their friends, like you had with Ellen at the Oscars, or you want to take a picture of yourself with the Grand Canyon at the back, or you want to take a picture or a video as you're video conferencing with somebody else, which is also the same use case. And in every one of these use cases, the current technology actually falls short. And if you look at the case where you just want to take a selfie of yourself, for whatever purpose, you are noticing that as you hold the phone up, you're not far enough away, and there's a lot of distortion of your face. Your nose looks bigger than it should be. Your face is narrower. And how do you correct that? I mean, people do it today because there's no other option. But as people begin to solve these problems using technology, I think you're going to find that the person or the technology that does that better than others is actually going to win out in some sense in the market. So you have to address the distortion aspect. How do you correct for the distortion? There are several technologies in the market today or about to come up, like panmorphic lenses that you might have seen upstairs, where they have these really wide-angle panmorphic lenses, which are different from fisheye. It allows you to correct for the distortion, gives you a better experience. But at the same time, there are other times when you want to take a selfie where you want to capture not just yourself, but the Grand Canyon or the big, panorama behind you. And that becomes a problem because with many of these lenses, you have a depth of field. And so at that close distance, you want to focus on your face. There's not much focus left for the back. And how do you enable a capture that captures both you and the background in focus? And so some of these technologies, I think, still have to develop. We are not quite there yet. But these things need to be addressed properly so that people begin to use them more in widespread scenarios.
Yeah, so if can I get this go? Yeah. So just a couple of thoughts to follow up on what Karthik said. The way I see it is that I think it's absolutely right that the technology is not yet there in terms of solving those problems, as Karthik said. But what is very interesting about, I think, what mobile imaging has done, which is probably done for many other things as well, what it did to voice connectivity, what it did to internet connectivity. When you have the same legacy user experience brought to a platform like a mobile, I think the users just establish new ways of using it, right? And that sort of drives the technology. For example, I think I think he mentioned something about, so I think to some extent the fact that people are taking a lot of, let's say, less than perfect selfies now, right? I mean, they are using panoramas, they're trying there. So in other words, they're establishing a significant evidence out there that there is a demand for these things, right? Whereas previously, we did not hear about the word selfie, even though theoretically you could get the same selfie with the DSLR or whatever. But it just, just the nature of people using the devices is changing what the content is going to be created. So that actually presents itself a very good opportunity for people like us, where, to some extent you don't have to worry about, I have a solution looking for a problem. People are actually documenting problems that we can try to solve. Just a couple of quick examples are, using panorama shots to sort of solve the problem of selfie, right? I mean, Bradley Cooper's hand may not be long enough, but at least if it pans wide enough, he can probably get more people into the scene. Now, obviously, that presents a lot of challenges in terms of dealing with motion and stuff like that, because what you don't want to have is ghosts and stuff like that. But those are problems that I think are slowly but steadily getting solved. The other interesting aspect is, as we go from computational photography, I think even though the word is not used as often, but I think there is probably a notion of collaborative photography as well, where you have multiple shots of the same thing sort of assimilated into one seamless image capture. The number of cameras that we have in this room is probably maybe more than one per person, right? I mean, a little bit more than one per person. So how can we all compose all of this together into recording a memory that's common? Those are all things that I think are going to come, but primarily because I think the demand is being established, even if it is with imperfect, bad selfies.
I don't want to add to the obvious great comments from my esteemed panelists. I remember when originally was my previous life, we were working on the first front-facing cameras, applications that you were envisioning transformed from video chat type of applications to imaging, and as Karthik and Anand mentioned, that there's infinite room for improvement in each of these areas. But along the photography elements and imaging elements that we discussed, what we see right now of what else type of applications in the area of computer vision that could be enabled with front-facing cameras. People, a lot of companies around the world are using applications or enabling applications that improve the search, for instance. When your Siri or Google Now or any of these applications, people are frustrated with accent recognitions or be able to, when do you start the speech, when you start recognizing. By having this camera embedded into by reading your face, your emotions, your lips, that improves a lot of other functions and capabilities. So there's multiple different angles that each of these cameras will take beyond just computational photography or imaging into areas that are visual sensing and computational computer vision as well.
So I think we need to look at this a little bit differently, which is how are selfies taken and used? You see two primary use modes. One is a bunch of people squeeze in like the Bradley Cooper picture. And in that situation, then a panamorphic lens works really well. However, you have the other one, which Karthik mentioned, you're at the Grand Canyon or you're taking out riders at the Tour de France, whichever you're trying to do for your selfies. And that's a different model. And that, I want a good picture of the background. I want a good picture of the event. And that means 2 meg's good enough. We don't want that to get out into the industry, right? Because they're taking these good pictures or relatively good pictures with them in it and the scene. So for that, panamorphic isn't good because I'm not going to get a good resolving of the overall scene. And there, you maybe want to start considering embedding, where I'm holding the camera out and I'm taking a picture of the Grand Canyon or the riders going by, while simultaneously taking a picture of myself. And then embedding me into the main cam scene. A little safer, better quality, and I can pick whether that's the one selfie I want of me in that shot, because I can add or subtract if I want to take a different picture of me. So I think as an industry, we need to be looking at the use modes for the consumer and start to figure out how we can best serve them. Because right now, we're doing neither well.
All right, let's go to next question. How many of you saw the Nokia 1020 commercial? It was, let me set it up. I would show it to you, but my legal said I had to get permission, and I didn't have time, which is really frustrating because it's a hilarious commercial. But essentially,
you got permission only for the orange.
Yeah, I got permission for the orange. So just to set up the commercial, it's hilarious. It's essentially a school play, right? You guys, okay, he said, oh, no, so you remember it. School play, everybody has their smartphones out, right? And it's pandemonium. Everybody's trying to get closer, and it's a one-upmanship, and they're beating each other, and it's just absolute chaos, right? And the message at the end is you see the parents with the Nokia 1020 sitting in the back, right, totally at peace. Oh, look at the shot, and they zoom in, right? So, and the message is 41 megapixels reinvented zoom, right? That's the message they got across. First thing to notice, camera imaging is selling smartphones. So it is high value to people. So that's the first thing. I just want to highlight that. But the second thing is, are we on a megapixel race? And when does it stop? Right? I mean, I love all the Chinese cameras, but every other week it's a box spec, straight up, right? Is this going to continue? What's the value to the consumers? Is it really for Zoom? Love to get you guys' opinion on that. Karthik?
So, we should probably take a look at what megapixels are really defining. I think if you look at what we're trying to do out here, you're trying to get the kind of resolution that your eye sees. I mean, that's really where we're going. That's the holy grail of imaging, right? And if you look at what the human eye does, I mean, we have 120 million rods and cones, and it's going to take a while for us to get up to that level. The problem is, it is today a zero-sum game, especially in mobile imaging, because the only way to increase your pixel density, shrink the pixel count, you're losing light sensitivity. What that Nokia commercial didn't really probably explain is if that play that they were shooting was in a slightly dimly lit room. When you zoom into the picture, you're going to get the picture maybe, but you're going to get a very grainy picture. And the question I think that we have to ask as technologists is how do you delink the pixel size from the number of megapixels? How do you do it in a way that scales? And there are several solutions. I think array cameras is obviously one, because by reducing the optical format and spreading it around a number of multi-aperture systems, you can actually relax the z-height constraints, which is obviously a big part of the industrial design in cell phones. And there may be others that we haven't looked at. I think there are companies like Core Photonics that are coming out with multi-camera systems where you're changing the field of view, right? So you have a smaller field of view. You're capturing both the wide field of view lens and so multi-camera systems like that are another way to approach this. But that adds to the cost of the system, and also you lose the ability to continuously zoom, so to speak, which you can have in the DSLRs. Which of these will win depends on the kind of applications that you have and the kind of needs of that applications. But you'll see more and more of these multi-camera shots, whether it's separate multiple cameras or array cameras, will give you some solutions to some of these problems.
So I'm trying to find out where the wait list is for the hover phone, so I could just send the phone out to take the picture. But until that happens, this question has been asked since the first Q-SIF CMOS imager was made. It's an argument that the engineers always have, and my answer has always been the same: marketing wins. Right? The consumer understands the number on the side of the box. They don't understand responsivity. They don't understand dB, so they definitely don't understand dynamic range. They understand 12 megapixel, 13 megapixel. Well, 13 megapixel must be a better camera than a 12 megapixel because it's one more, right? So what we're seeing in the industry, though, is the start of a reconsideration being led by HTC and Apple, where they said, stop. In HTC's case, they said, we think 4 meg's good enough. The market said, probably not. But in Apple's case, they're saying 8 meg and better, bigger pixels, better performance is where we're happy to be right now. So you're starting to see this spread, where you've got certain OEMs with their flagship phones are still, screaming, "Where's my 0.9 micron pixel with 32 megapixel resolution? I want it immediately." And you've got the other side, which is, you know what? I want an extra micron or an extra 0.1 micron in that pixel. So you're starting to see the split. I've said for quite some time, anything more than 12 is kind of a waste because we really don't have anywhere to view it. Nobody prints, right? So, anything more than UHD, it's going to be another 5-6 years before you're going to have a good platform to view anything better. So this moves you to, zoom, and then you have the trade-off. How do I fit 41, 56, 75 million pixels in the form factor for a phone? And the answer is, I really trade off quality on that full zoom image. And you're not seeing the market really jump up and say, yeah, this is how we want it. So the alternative is where you're looking at multi-camera platforms in your phone, where you'll have, as Kartik mentioned, companies like Core Photonics, where you'll have a wide field of view and a narrow field of view. Maybe you'll have 3 or 4, so that you can select and move between these while we start figuring out different ways to do optics, different ways to enhance super resolution. But right now, marketing wins.
All right.
So yeah, just wanted to sort of follow up on those 2 comments. I think there is a fundamental limits, right? On optics, light only travels in straight lines, and there's only so many photons and electrons that you can collect, and so we are facing fundamental limits. So the way I see it, though, is that as cameras change, one thing that might happen is that today we are assuming when you take a picture with your smartphone or even any camera, all pixels are the same, right? But in reality, there is always a point of interest. There is always a region of interest that is more interesting. So I think that the total number of pixels is probably not as important as the pixel density, the pixels per inch on the real world thing that you're actually trying to capture. So there's one way in which, if technology advances such that somehow the camera automatically knows what is the region of interest compared to others. And somehow if you can sort of get all the 8, 10 megapixels to the point where you are interested in, then maybe the overall number of pixels may not be high while still satisfying the need for the user's point of interest. That's why I like some of the work that is being done in the industry on array camera, focus changes, right? After, to basically be able to focus on an image afterwards. Those are all techniques of sort of decoupling the point of interest at consumption from when it was captured. So that actually is an example, and the same thing might happen to resolution, zoom, and other things, right? Because I think you need the resolution at the point of consumption, really. Of course, it's easier to capture maximally and then oversupply it and then capture it, render it later. But maybe there's a combination of graphics and camera that can come together to deliver that.
But I think the problem with that is, how do you get the consumer to understand it? Right, and that's what I'm talking about. That's what I mean when I say marketing wins. They understand 13 megapixel. They don't understand 8 megapixel on the part you care about.
Well, you call it
right?
ultra pixels.
So, but it gets out as, here is what the expected performance is, right? And so that's the issue, is how do we get the average consumer to understand something other than pixels? And until we do that, yes, there's a pixel war.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next question. So there's been some other ways to approach better quality on smartphones. Maybe you guys have seen the Galaxy S4 Zoom, the 10x optical stack that they put on there. This week at Photokina, Panasonic announced the CM1. They put a big, fat 1-inch sensor in there. That's kind of cool. Obviously, Nokia put a big 41 megapixel. These are smartphone cameras. I don't know anymore, right? It's really doing a mashup. Is the mashup good? And really what they're trying to do is overcome some benefits that we see in DSC and DLSR. And what are those, right? They have great lenses. They have really beautiful sensors, right? They have great zoom, optical stabilization. I mean, all those sort of things. So I guess the question is, how do we overcome the traditional strengths that we see in photography, in the more consumer and professional level photography? And then in particular, the smartphone platform brings other elements that these other platforms have, right? A DSLR has usually really crappy processor in there, right? It just does great imaging. But if you want to do a UI, the UIs suck on these things. I'm sorry, right? I mean, compared to a smartphone, right? The things you're used to, pinching, zooming, finding things. And you're starting to see Androids showing up in some of the phones. But there's GPU, there's DSPs, there's octa-cores. So if you take the strengths of DSLRs and the strength of smartphones, when do we start seeing them come together? And just in general, what are your thoughts to overcome some of the traditional DSC and DSLR benefits with some of the things that a smartphone platform brings? And maybe we'll start on Paul's this time and bring it back this way.
Well, one of the things we're starting to see is that the market is adopting multiple imagers to develop a single image. And what that enables you to do is it enables you, we just talked about being able to have different fields of view, but I can also now have color and monochrome sensors merged together. So, I mean, one of the fundamental issues with devices and phones is your pixels are very light starved. If I was to put an optical zoom in there, I'm going to start giving up f-stops as I start zooming farther and farther in, and my hand is shaking, I've got a much less sensitive sensor, and something far away is moving at a much greater rate, everything's going to look blurry. It's going to be for motion blur. So by having the ability to have the lenses designed to have narrower fields of view and being able to merge and overlap and fuse these images together, that's one way to start to address that. The other side is if I have a color sensor and a monochrome sensor, it's like walking outside with a pair of sunglasses and having one of the lenses fall out. You see a big difference in how much light your eyes are getting between the two. And this is what happens on the sensors. So you can take the current light-starved pixels, and now you have a much, much more light getting in. And so when you merge and you can start using this to enhance the luminant data, you can start extending the low-light color performance and start getting close to where you are with these really nice, big, glass, expensive lenses.
So there are a couple of points here, obviously, very interesting discussions along the various axes that add to this. But at the end of the day, I think there's a big push for the handset vendors to be able to improve the cameras. And they're doing a marvelous job in this area. But I'm not sure if we plot how good we decide what the camera is and correlate it which one are selling better, that necessarily will intersect. Maybe one vendor will stand out. So it doesn't necessarily mean that something that is much better camera is going to sell more number of handsets, right? There are other factors that are involved with this device that is a lot more complex as a convergent device. So I think is being trying to solve overall is a problem of physics, that you're dealing with a DSLR with lenses that are large, the capture elements that are different, and we're trying to expect same thing to be done with a much, much smaller device fighting physics at that level. So what matters for the consumers, as Paul mentioned, that people don't understand the difference between 3.1 and 3.2, let alone for f-stops and others, it becomes a lot more complicated. For what matters for people is low light at a high level. They want to be able to take pictures at a low light. They don't get, when they go to birthday parties of their kids, they want to zoom, they can't, the quality of the zoom is different. There are certain tangible areas that people can relate to, and this is what people drive to be able to make things better, whether it's 41 megapixel versus a 13 megapixel and 16 megapixel for people, if it doesn't solve the fundamental user experience, wouldn't mean much. The reason phones are a lot more successful than DSCs, image quality gets to a level that people take decent pictures that are acceptable, but the element of a convenience of a phone that you can instantly transmit it across the world, that's the reason. Instagram didn't win, that wasn't valued at that level, was because it was a great image quality or take pictures at a very high quality. So it's a convenience and all the combination of the package is what matters to people.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess my first thought, Danny, on is it the camera that's going to become your DSLRs, are they going to become a smarter, or are the smartphone cameras going to get better imaging? I actually think that the simplistic view that I have is that I think there will be both devices owned by almost everybody, at least two, right? So, and the thing is the processing behind the optics, I think might even be identical in both. So the way I see it is technically there is really no real reason why you can't have the smart user interface display on a DSLR. And in that sense, I think there will be both. Sort of the analogy I draw is on the display side, right? I mean, many of us have a smartphone, a small display device, also a tablet. And I think there are times when we use both. And I think as the prices on those two come down significantly, I believe people will have both. Now, the interesting questions that come up are the basic processing behind them, do they also have to be duplicated across those devices? Or can they be swapped? Can you dock one on the other? Those are all interesting things that come to mind. But I actually think fundamentally, as long as light remains light, as in travels straight lines. In fact, I think on the capturing the world side of view, I think we have less flexibility than even content consumption on the display side, right? Where you can potentially, there was a talk saying that some websites are better viewed on a tablet than a mobile device. But the content gets changed so that it's now equally consumable on all of them. But yet we still have two devices. In capturing images and videos, you cannot change the world. So I think there will be both, regardless of whether it's the same processing on both.
You can't put a DSLR in your pocket.
Yeah.
Right? You don't carry it around. I mean, I just went on a vacation in Panama, and I did not bring my big camera. I brought a very high-end DSC, which still fit in my pocket, so I could take all those pictures. So I think there's a form factor issue. And then there's a price issue. I don't know if I agree with your point that everybody's going to have two. We have the top 5% can afford a DSLR, but the 95%, they still haven't even got their first camera yet, right? So, and smartphones will be the first.
So I think I actually agree with that point of view. I'm going to take a slightly different point of view here because this is, form factor, industrial design, ability to take a camera in your pocket that can take as good a picture as DSLR is really where we want to go. That is the kind of the holy grail of imaging. But if you look at the physics of the situation, you have Canon 5D, for example, has a 6-micron pixel. So the area of the pixel is 36 microns squared. You compare that with the pixel sizes that you have today in your cell phone, that's 1.1 micron squared, which is about 35 times. Your Canon DSLR is capturing 35 times more light in the same exposure that your cell phone camera is capturing. And how do you address this gap? And if you look at that, you see that, as we talked earlier, megapixels are important as long as it's not a zero-sum game, as long as you don't compromise light sensitivity in pursuit of the megapixels. DSLRs can afford to do that. You see DSLRs that have 25 megapixels, some of them have Hasselblad has 50 megapixels, and the quality is there when you actually do that. So how do you get that gap? And one way to address that gap is actually, Paul mentioned it obliquely in passing, which is to de-link the optical issues that arise from having really large XY, form factors and sensors, because what that does is your lens stack height is increased tremendously, which is why you cannot put that DSLR in your pocket. One way to avoid that is to actually split up that single large aperture into a number of smaller apertures. And now each aperture is a much smaller aperture. The lens stack actually reduces, and now you have to go to the fusion approach. And the pixels also can get somewhat smaller because you have the advantage of oversampling. You would have noticed, for example, if you take 20 images of a static scene and you average all of them, you will end up getting a much sharper and less noisier image because the noise in the picture actually tends to go down as the factor of the square root of the number of pictures you take. And oversampling certainly presents a solution to that, and array cameras lend itself naturally to that kind of extension. And I think you will see that as the compute technologies become available. I think this is a natural progression, and these will become available that people don't have to have two cameras in your pocket. I mean, one in your pocket and one in your bag. So.
Okay. All right. Project Tango. I think it's really excited a lot of people. Depth has been out there for a long time. Google's always good at getting people, motivated and providing fantastic platforms, software, everything that the developer community needs. But what's the killer app for depth, right? Do we really need it? I mean, is it technology in search of a problem, or is it solving a real problem that will see depth on every camera in the next 2 years? Let's start with Farshid. I know you guys are working on...
Yes. So as we talked about the evolution of the photography in the last few years, camera phones have done a marvelous job to catch up, that obviate the need for carrying a secondary camera with you because the image qualities are good. And there's infinite room for improvement, Dari. There's no question about this. The other axis that is, we see that people trying to improve once we have good pictures, or we never have good pictures, at least we have aspiration to get the picture quality improved. What else can we do with this? So in order to be able to improve in that axis, there's a computational photography to add more computation with imaging, with all the creative and exotic ideas. Some of my colleagues have done some marvelous work in this areas to be able to excite ourselves with the kind of things that can be done. But the other axis, if on human brain, if you look at what we do, so we looked at things and we're trying to get our cameras to be like our eyes, to see things as the quality of our eyes. As Karthik mentioned, we are long away from this, but that's what makes room for growth and excitement. But what our brain does with our eyes a lot more than looking at good pictures. We analyze, we visually process, we do many, many different things. What I've seen in Tango, what the leadership and vision that the team have shown, what can be accomplished with this? What are the kind of things? They're showing that you can add depth to this. You can reconstruct 3D objects. You could bring Connect type of applications, Microsoft Connect type of applications into the mobile phones. You could do indoor navigations. A lot of these things are not necessarily just technologies for the sake of technologies. If they can accomplish them at a reasonable budget with a reasonable cost, is a useful application that all of us will use.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I want to add a couple of words there. So I think depth is a pretty important part, of the world we live in, right? I mean, without depth, there's a reason why all of us have more than one eye. And yet, ever since photography has existed, we have just captured a portion of this information. And so we don't quite know what we are missing yet. And so as depth becomes available and technologies that lead into Tango and makes depth available, you'll find that everything that you're doing today becomes a lot easier. Because with depth, it's easier to segment, for instance. It's easier to apply effects that are more tedious to do in Photoshop. But at the same time, it also gives you the information that leads into branches like robotics and computer vision. A big part of computer vision is really trying to identify objects. A robot today, for example, cannot do things easily that a 2-year-old kid could do. And one of the big differences is the fact that the robot doesn't have the information it doesn't have that training because it's got depth. I mean, robots have stereo vision, but it's still trying to make sense of what it sees. It's not able to recognize that. There was actually a story not so long ago about this person who was blind. He had a congenital defect in his eye, and he was blind. And he was blind for the first 30 years of his life, and then technology advanced to the point where doctors were able to repair that problem, and he suddenly had vision, full 20/20 vision. It was some optic nerve that they were able to connect. And the interesting thing was that he was now able to see, much like you and me, but he still had trouble seeing in the true sense of the word, because through all of those developmental years where the brain or the computer, so to speak, it reconciles the stereo vision and is able to make sense of what it's seeing, that hadn't developed. So for instance, he was still having trouble when he walked up stairs. The eyes were seeing 3D, but the brain was not able to reconcile that, and he was not able to move his feet up. And it's, to some extent, I think you can say, we are much in the same sort of, it's a analogy that we are seeing in the imaging world, where we have been blind to depth for 150 years, and now we are just beginning to see depth. And what are we going to do with it? I think it's going to be an exciting world.
Okay.
So just to follow up on that, just sort of give a slightly different view on that, Karthik. I think while I think this Project Tango and the ecosystem driving towards acquiring depth in addition to your traditional optical view, the RGB, the view texture capture that we all have been used to, I think this is very, very good, because I think you have to put the devices in everybody's hands to actually figure out what can be done. Because from a purely computer vision standpoint, as Karthik mentioned, depth is an obvious cue. I mean, it is very well known that if you have depth, lots of the problems become very, very simple, which is what we do.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, I mean, just to even, like he said, like object recognition, even to segment out an object from this room, for example, if I have to take a picture, it's easier to segment out somebody knowing that they are in different planes. But just the opposite analogy to what Karthik just mentioned about a person who was always had only one eye, and then he was not able to reconstruct the model. The opposite might also be true, that if you have a good idea about the world in 3D already from other reasons, maybe even with single view, you may be able to some extent reconstruct the 3D. The brain can do what your eye can't. So the reason why I think this is important is because the fact that depth should enable all these tasks is intuitive. But I think it has to be proven. As in, it has to be proven that, yes, indeed, if you say, I want to reconstruct an object, is the state of the art of the sensors, the acquisition, the depth sensors, acquisition today of acquiring something at a particular distance and be able to construct the model from it, what are the resolution limits on those? What is the quality of the depth engines that we have to build? What is the rate at which we have to acquire? All those things are all TBD in my mind. But I think the reason why I think the Project Tango and other projects like this inside Google or outside in the industry are that I think they are driving towards that. I mean, that is the positive aspect of all of this.
In terms of apps, I would start with a caveat that the consumer is not going to give up image quality to get depth. Okay. The expectation is that the image quality is maintained, or their perception of image quality is maintained. But having said that, what we've seen over the last several years is socialization and gaming. What can I do with this platform to enhance my gaming experience? What can I do with a picture to make it easy to modify before I post it, right? Most people, it's an immediacy issue. I take the picture, I post it. I take the picture, I didn't look at it that well. All right, I got to pull that one, right? Or the other side of it is, if I've enabled this to be very simplistically modified, maybe I can allow everyone else who I'm letting see this image, or certain people who I'm letting see this image, modify it. So right now on Facebook, you hit the like button, you write the equivalent of a Twitter comment under the picture, and you move on with your life. maybe now you could say, well, maybe I want to add something to that picture, or maybe I want to remove something from that picture, or maybe I want to modify something from that picture, and then repost it, and then it becomes a serialized event. And so something along those lines is where potential, and this is where, in order to edit, I need to be able to isolate. I need to be able to separate objects because I have a finger on my phone. That's my tool, right? So that's the expectation of I don't have a roller mouse, I don't have a Wacom tablet or whatever else to be able to do these image modifications. And this is where you have an opportunity where depth can really start to enable people to have fun. And I think that's what a lot of the focus has to
Okay, so I'm hearing social media type applications, sort of photo editing, fixing. I heard gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And any other apps? I mean, because this is the thing everybody's pondering right now. Every time I talk to an OEM, tell me how I can use depth.
I think object
Right.
recognition.
Object recognition? I mean, we can do bokeh effects and all those type of things and background subtraction with stack frame technology, right? I mean, there's other ways to do some of this. I mean, what is the killer app? I mean, I imagine a lot of people out here want to know this too, right? Because there's businesses to be built around it, actually.
I mean, I'll tell you, at least from my point of view, what I would like to see is a 3D memory capture, right, of things that you do not have a CAD model of to begin with, right? I mean, I would like to get a 3D
We're going to tap into your brain?
capture of all of us, and then get a statue printed of us, So that's what I want.
So wait. So 3D printing.
Yeah.
You're saying that's the killer app.
Right. The question is whether the technology is there yet today, or not. That is the question. So personally, that's
Yeah, I think
something
the problem
like,
with
yeah.
printing right now. Who has a 3D printer here? Okay, there's the problem. They're too expensive, right? But does it get to the $99 HP 3D printer? And people sell the coils that jam on the side, right? And now I can print my kids' Legos, right? Because the dog ate it, right? I don't know, but maybe that's the thing that really tips it. I think there's really, I mean, we're technologists. We love this stuff, but you guys are app developers. So if you can think of how to solve the problem, you'll help all of us technologists bring the product out. And I think we're at a point we need to close up. So I thought it might be worthwhile. There's some real brain power out here. Maybe one or two questions. We got a mic right here, and you can ask the panelists. You probably could ask one. You have to go over to the mic. I'll bring it to you. So no?
Hi, yeah. I was just thinking when you were talking about the separation between the camera and the device and where they meet in the middle. And we're seeing things like Samsung Gear VR where you've got the computation in the cell phone and the interface of the cell phone augmenting another device. Do you think we're going to see more of that with cameras? Do you think we'll see cameras come out that are, the optics and the image quality, and then using the device as the engine to process it?
I can take that. Yeah, I think so. The thing is, you can do a lot more today with more information that you capture. The problem is, we don't have the capacity in the cell phone to process all of that information. So, an obvious answer to that is cloud computing. So, you will see that as cloud computing, it's already becoming, widely used. Coupling that with your device that's used to capture the data and being able to process that later on for more richer set of images, I think it's going to become more widespread than it is today. And I think it's just a natural evolution of what we are seeing today.
I think it also depends on the workload. If the workload is moderate and then the battery life constraints are different, obviously that a lot can be done. But if people adding more capabilities, more capturing elements, more exotic topologies for cameras and more image sensors that have to be fused together, that yet to be seen, may need for local processing power. Remember that used to be a thin client, everything was on a cloud. Now we understand that no, there had to actually be more beefier clients, phones had to get smarter, and never a need for that to end. And I think the same thing will happen to all the IoT devices as well.
So I actually think it's already there. It's already been out there. It's been out there for almost 5 years now, if you start looking at things like EDOF, right, where I was purposely distorting the image so that I recreate it and create a much deeper depth of field image. So, I mean, that's some of the precursors to the computational camera work that's going on now. So a lot of this has been out. I think you look at some of the work that Tesla was doing with their optimal zoom, where they were purposely designing the lenses so that they could recreate a zoom effect from a single camera, no moving parts. So you've had a couple runs, a couple tries at this. I think it's a combination of, you know, the consumer not willing to give up on image quality at all to get this performance, and then the processing power to be able to do this functionality, because there's an immediacy. I expect to be able to see this picture as soon as I take it, right? So that means I have to get it. If I don't have the processing power in front of me, I have to get it to the cloud and get it back processed that fast. So we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll close out the session. Thanks again, and hopefully some of these ideas will spur some new innovation. Thank you.